I have got a great show today. We're going to be going over the Israeli-Palestine situation. We're going to be touching on Joe Biden. Is he corrupt? We're going to talk about Donald Trump. We're also going to talk about the Speaker of the House situation. I have with me today Jack Posobiec to help me get through all of the clutter, all of the news to find the truth. Jack, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Steve, an absolute pleasure, my friend. Had a blast the last time we were on. Ton of great response. So here I am again. And it's strange. I guess it's like a month since I was on. Not really much has happened. Not really has changed. I mean, I don't know. You watching baseball? You watching the playoffs? Because there isn't really anything going on in world affairs, war, that kind of stuff. Nothing at all.
I've never worked so much in my life. The news cycle is just insane.
Well, what's crazy is that just over in the past week or so, and I was speaking at an event in upstate Pennsylvania, talking about this at like a Second Amendment rally. And as you can imagine, upstate Pennsylvania loves their Second Amendment, and I say that as a son of Pennsylvania as well myself. That I was saying, it's crazy because in my Telegram feed, it's just war footage and Zero Sum 24 is posting stuff from both sides, atrocities, just craziness. My text messages, I'm getting sources from all over the place. And then I go to my family chat, and then so I'm from the Philadelphia area, and so the Phillies are actually doing well in the playoffs, and they're sort of giving me the, there's a home run, and there's a bases loaded, and then out, and it's just like two worlds going on at the exact same time, depending on what bubble you look in. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I think it's actually good that there's some people that are focused on just enjoying the normal life that's out there, but at the same time, I worry that there are people that are just sort of lulled into this. And don't get me wrong, my family, watches me, and they know what's going on. But I do worry that there are people that are lulled into this false sense of security because we see so much going on. The United States clearly overextended. Janet Yellen coming out this morning saying, "Oh, it's no problem. Our economy can afford to fight two wars at the same time." She actually says this and says it's because the economy is doing so well that the United States can afford to be continuing our proxy war in Ukraine, which has been just a complete failure, at least in terms of this last counteroffensive that was billed as the year-long winner for Ukraine, and then goes again and says, and we can get involved in this new war between Israel and the Palestinians, Gaza, which could easily spill over into it, and in some extents already is spilling over into getting Hezbollah involved, getting the West Bank involved, or potentially other regional actors. And this is exactly what John Mearsheimer warned. We call it Mearsheimer's warning on human events. We talk about it all the time till we're blue in the face. The United States will overextend and at the same time drive every sort of node of the multipolar world into a coalition against essentially the collective West. And the United States is so upset about this that it seems like it's now the policy of the neocons and the neolibs to drive all of these nodes into conflict simultaneously, which is probably the worst possible foreign policy blunder in American history.
Yeah, I saw that Janet Yellen had said that. I think she said that because just the day before, President Biden did one of his rare sit-downs where he was asked, can the United States afford to fight a two-front war? And he said, absolutely, we're the United States of America. And this idea that we live under an invincibility cloak.
Pax Americana, right?
Yeah, it's insane to me. But my mind didn't even go to war. My mind went to, okay, if we're so rich, how come we can't take care of the people in Hawaii? How come we can't take care of the hardworking seniors that are getting less money on Social Security than the benefits given to illegal immigrants each month? How come we can't take care of homelessness? How come we can't take care of children that are food unstable? There's so many things that we should be doing with American tax money, and yet what they're really saying is the world will allow us one more time to print more money so that we can fund this war. I mean, there is no money to pay for this war. It's future debt that they will have to print in order to pay for this war. How does this money ever get paid back?
Well, the money doesn't get paid back. The money just goes into debt. The money gets paid through inflation, which we're already seeing. And by the way, don't let the kabuki theater that the Biden administration throws out there saying that, oh, the inflation's only 6-7%. When you can go, there was a viral TikTok video that came out earlier today of a guy just comparing. I guess he's a Costco shopper, and he pulled up all of his Costco photos of the prices from 1 year ago versus the same prices today. And he was seeing 60%, 70%, 75% on, we're talking basic essentials. So, eggs, mayonnaise, bread, basic staples, milk, that are going way, way up. And of course, the government will pull every trick they can to say that inflation isn't going up when we know that it obviously is. Now, they're doing just fine. The military industrial complex is doing just fine, especially, and it's amazing. It's almost eerie. It's almost eerie how the minute that the funding died in Congress for the Ukraine war, right before the Speaker of the House was knocked out, by the way, Kevin McCarthy, that just after that happened, 1 week later, suddenly there's a new war between Israel and Gaza. Now, I'm not saying that this was like set up or prepared. I really do think this was just a massive intelligence failure on the part of Netanyahu's government. But at the same time, it really boggles the mind, just as it seemed like the Ukraine war was dying down, that a new war erupts that sort of takes its place, not only in terms of the media attention that it's been getting, and that's sort of the line that's been going around out there, that Israel ended the Ukraine war, but also in terms of the political capital and the money flowing to the coffers of the military industrial complex. And you can just look at the stocks, go look at the Raytheon stock, go look at the rest. And I'd love to see, and I know there's a couple Uncommon Whales and a few other Twitter accounts that are going through to look and see which congressmen and senators were going in big. Markwayne Mullin, the senator of Oklahoma, went big into defense stocks just before the attack from Hamas on Israel. Now, again, I'm not saying that proves anything, but it's very interesting, especially when we know that there was intel out there that was being shared by the Egyptians. There were other Middle Eastern intel services that were sharing intel that something was coming from Hamas, possibly targeting Israel. Seems like Netanyahu and the IDF just didn't want to pay attention.
Yeah. Speaking of border issues, do you find it interesting that for 2 years, well, actually longer than that, building a wall, Trump's idea of building a wall was xenophobic and racist. And then out of nowhere, the Biden administration's like, oh, we got to build that wall. We'll get rid of, a couple dozen environmental red tapes and start building a wall again. It's almost as if they know something's coming. Why do you think there's this sudden zeal to make themselves racist and xenophobic by building a wall to protect our country?
Well, I think that what's happened, at least in terms of the Biden administration, the Democrats writ large, that they understand that the election is coming up. As we sit and record this, we're 91 days away from the first votes being cast in 2024. 91 days. And so they know, because the election is coming up, that they've got to really do something to pivot, if not to the right, then at least to the middle, because these issues, look, the fact that CNN doesn't show it, the fact that MSNBC doesn't show it, that doesn't mean social media doesn't exist. And they can see the numbers like anybody else. And you're even seeing people like the All In podcast just really committing a full mea culpa and saying, we were sorry. Okay, we're sorry. Trump was right about the border. Trump was right, by the way, about the Middle East and trying to find ways to make peace, bring this peace process, peace accords together, not in a way that everybody's going to like, but in a way that at least we can stop the bombs from dropping and the children being killed and all this, craziness that's going on. And I think that what you're really seeing now from the Biden administration is a political correction, so that when they're on the debate stage, and they do intend, by the way, to, at least there's a longer analysis I could give about what's going on the Democrat side, but from the Biden White House side, the Biden team side, I should say, they fully intend for Biden to run. So they want him to be able to say, well, actually, we did continue the border. Actually, we did arrest people. Actually, we were doing stuff like this, even though we all know that for 2.5 years, they did absolutely nothing and let millions of people come into our country unchecked.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, but they say the left goes really left and then comes back to the middle when it's time to vote. The right goes super right, then they come back to the middle when it's time to vote. My guess is they've been doing significant polling data, and that polling data said the border situation is important to us, and that's why they've made this sudden change. Is it all comes down to they need us when they need our vote. Other than that, keep your mouth shut. We don't need you, right? And so getting those votes is super important. Now you said something interesting. You said that you believe Biden is fully preparing to run. So there is no Gavin Newsom about to jump into the race. Is the plan to get him elected and then hand the baton off to Kamala Harris?
Well, so this is where I was saying there's a wider analysis of what's going on the Democrat side. And to be clear, just to add on the border, that what we're seeing on the border is hybrid warfare. This is absolutely hybrid warfare spent by globalists to force not only massive demographic change in the United States, but to really stress every system and every institution in our country. This is hybrid warfare. It is an invasion, and anyone who's not saying that, it just isn't paying attention to the situation. Now, when I talk about the Democrat side, I'm speaking in terms of when I made that comment about Biden, that's Team Biden. Okay, but the Biden administration is only one node of the Democrat Party and really the Democrat movement right now as we see it. So that the left writ large. And for that team, that includes, of course, Tony Blinken, who is essentially the person in charge of U.S. foreign policy at this point. In fact, he has been, along with Victoria Nuland, pretty much running the show all along. Biden isn't really making any of these decisions by himself. Tony Blinken, by the way, you might remember him from such things as the Iraq partition plan, where he was going to split Iraq up into 3 countries for the Sunni, the Shia, and the Kurds. That was actually a Tony Blinken special all the way back from like 2005. But no, what we're actually seeing on the Democrat side, and Dr. Jill Biden is a huge part of this as well, but she's really one of the big drivers in the White House, that they understand that Biden probably isn't their best chance for 2024. And in fact, what I've heard from the Hill and other folks that we talk to, even people in, that are close to Nancy Pelosi, they don't want Biden to run again. However, he's refusing to drop out. He's refusing to come up and say publicly that, I'm looking at health issues. My son obviously is facing legal issues. I want to step back and just be there for my family. He could find any number of off ramps, or say simply, I've accomplished what I meant to accomplish. I've had a long career. This has been the capstone, and I think it's time to pass. Whatever. He refuses to do that. They keep asking him to. He refuses to do that. And so there was a push, and there has been a push, I think it's quite obvious, for Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, to become the nominee. Ron DeSantis, I think, is making a huge political miscalculation coming up in a couple of weeks here, where he's going to be giving Governor Newsom a presidential platform in a campaign where Newsom is not a part of. He's not running for president, and yet DeSantis is giving him a platform as if he is running for president. He's just a governor. And so I'm not sure what the political calculus is there, but you really shouldn't be giving that level of relevance to someone who isn't running for president when you are yourself running for president. It's just doesn't make sense politically. It's not good politics. And so what Gavin Newsom intends to do is use that as a springboard then to potentially go for, now here's the interesting wrinkle on this. He doesn't plan to campaign for president. Here's the new idea, and let me walk you through this. There's a shadow campaign, a shadow primary going on the Democrat side, a shadow Democrat primary. You've got Biden, you've got Gavin Newsom, and I think people need to pay attention. Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is doing everything she can to try to get back into this thing. And remember, who was it just a few days ago that said MAGA extremists need to be sent to de-education, deprogramming, so re-education, deprogramming centers? This is the same type of rhetoric that we've heard from pretty much every radical group throughout history that manages to take over the organs of power of a state, whether it's the Bolsheviks in Russia, whether it's the Jacobins in France, whether it's the Maoists in China. This is always the first thing that happens. They go after the political opposition, they go after the kulaks, they go for the upper class upper middle class, I should say, the upper middle class are the targets for this dekulakization. The fact that she's out there saying things like that is because she wants to be in the conversation. She wants to be in the mix. And people need to understand the way the Democrat primary is run. It's not the same as the Republican primary. You go through a series of caucuses and states, and you cobble up the delegates, and then whoever gets the most delegates win. No, on the Democrat side, they did away with that in the 70s after Jimmy Carter. So after the 1976 election, they go to 80. By the 1980 election, that's all gone. What do they do instead? They bring forward a system, or maybe in 80, 84, they bring forward a system of super delegates. And in the super delegate system, what they have is essentially Democrat party bosses that become super delegates or can designate super delegates. They really hold the keys to the kingdom. And so they're the ones that make the decisions on the Democrat side. Very, very similar, by the way, to the same function that the DNC doesn't run Democrat politics. We've seen this. They've outsourced it to 501c4 groups, Soros groups, Arabelle investors, David Brock. By and large, we know that these are the groups that actually run Democrat politics. They're the ones that run elections. It's very rare that you see the DNC chair actually up and running things like you would see on the Republican side. So Newsome, Hillary, Biden, I think what you could end up seeing possibly is a situation where they run to a brokered convention on the Democrat side, or push for Joe Biden to, and think of it, right? Think of the theatrics, the drama of all of it. So, Trump looks like he's, going to clean up on the Republican side nomination. I think everyone kind of agrees with that at this point. But imagine if Biden gets up at the Democrat convention, the DNC, and says, I've received your nomination as president of the United States, but I respectfully decline. So Biden declines the nomination at the DNC, then boom, opens it up to a brokered convention. Then who comes in? The leader of the California delegation. And he doesn't put his name in himself. This is key. He doesn't put his name in, but somebody else says, I nominate Gavin Newsome, the governor of California, the leader of the delegation. Maybe the New York delegation nominates Hillary Clinton, whoever. Now you go round one, round two. Think of the media, think of the theatrics. They would be all over this thing. All of the momentum would be totally focused on this, all of the energy, the entire media. You'd be hearing about nothing about it for days, be on the front of every paper. And then whoever comes out of that would be seen as a leading challenger for the presidency, even as Donald Trump, of course, on his side, goes into a primary that I think at this point people largely view as not competitive. I think this is a huge plan and a huge push that's going on the Democrat side. I think it's actually playing, if you pay attention and read the tea leaves, it's playing out right in front of our eyes. Just all you have to do is add that one little idea that Newsome and Hillary are currently running for president. They're just not saying it.
Interesting. Yeah.
And not to mention Kamala Harris is in that mix as well. She's trying very hard to get there, but of course her pot, it's very hard for her to get any pot of money because coming also from California, she'd be competing for the same pot of the Silicon Valley mega billionaires that Gavin Newsom pretty much has locked up. Pete Buttigieg also is somebody that I think would definitely be a top VP choice for any Democrat contender.
Interesting. We'll have to see how it all plays out. Now they have to do all of that very soon, right?
Well, no, because the convention wouldn't be until the summer, so maybe I think August of 24.
Oh,
they've got
okay.
plenty of time.
So, but yeah, they would need
if
all
they end up doing it this way.
momentum that late in the game.
Right.
Okay, interesting. Okay, speaking of Hillary Clinton, former President Donald Trump announced today that he is suing Christopher Steele, who came up with the Steele dossier saying that he paid hookers to pee on him, and that he's been secretly colluding with Vladimir Putin to rig the election, all the lies, right? The Russia stuff. Do you think that lawsuit will go anywhere? It was obviously extremely damaging to his reputation. It cost the American taxpayer, almost $100 million in investigations, only to find out there was nothing there. Do you think this will be a nothing burger, or do you think it'll actually get some traction?
Well, it's going to be interesting. And so Trump, so in the United States, there's no real defamation law because of New York Times v. Sullivan, the Supreme Court case. But at the same time, Trump is suing Christopher Steele in the UK. Now, the UK does have strong defamation libel laws. The question is going to come down to standing. And so Christopher Steele is going to essentially argue that Donald Trump has no standing because he is not a UK citizen. Might be interesting if Trump tries to claim his properties in Scotland as part of his standing as a business owner in the UK, because he certainly is. He's got his Turnbull up there, so the golf course. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not he's able to maintain standing under that or some other sense, because essentially what you would be talking about is defamation tourism, which is something the UK doesn't really allow. This is why, by the way, that it is the SPLC, when they went up against Majid Nawaz, they actually lost and had to pay him $3.5 million for falsely labeling him a Muslim extremist, when in fact he's an anti-extremist Muslim. He's someone who works to de-radicalize Muslims. But the SPLC can operate with fair impunity when it comes to, I mean, they're just a smear operation and a Democrat money laundering operation, but they can operate with almost impunity when it comes to American citizens. But if you bring up a British citizen that they're defaming, and that British citizen brings you to UK courts, they are able to actually find judicial relief there. Now, when it comes to a US citizen, again, it comes very hard because of that question of standing. And I say that as someone who's not a lawyer, but just someone who's been in the game for a minute when it comes to this stuff. And so I do think, though, that in general, Donald Trump uses these, there's a lot of these lawsuits that Trump uses for political prowess. He uses them for promotion. He uses them to essentially show that he's fighting back, that he's willing to fight back and willing to put his money where his mouth is. And there's many times where he's done this in the past. And even if it doesn't end up becoming successful, the momentum and the punchback that he's showing, I think, will give a lot of support, not only to his allies, but also to people that have been asking questions about whether or not that whole narrative was true to begin with, when it clearly seems as though it was false at this point. I don't know any serious person that actually lends any credence to that. However, if you are someone on the far left, or if you're one of the I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term AWFL, the awfuls, the affluent white female liberals, then that's probably like the one last tier that actually still believes this stuff.
Yeah. The first area that Christopher Steele tried to have it thrown out is, he said, sure, Hillary Clinton cooked this whole thing up and paid for it, and they've been fined, but I didn't know that they were going to make this made up report public. But if he knew it was a made up report, why did he never come out and defend his reputation and say, hey, wait a minute, I was paid to invent this fake dossier. I didn't know it was going to be used. So I don't think he'll be able to use that to get the case thrown out, only because they're going to say, well, then why didn't you step forward and immediately say something? Why did you wait 6 years?
What's amazing is when I think of and I call them the journalists out there, these propagandists like Michael Isikoff and David Ignatius of the Washington Post, David Korn, some of these people in DC who just made their names off of spreading the Steele dossier in the early days, talking about like it was some big journalistic scoop, that people were taking it seriously. And let's be clear, Stephen, that the highest levels of the FBI took this thing seriously, the highest levels of the CIA took this thing seriously, or if you take the more cynical view, they exploited this dossier to open up investigations into spying on the presidential campaign of a man who was in the political opposition. They're doing the same thing right now down in Argentina against Javier Milei. Just opened up new charges on him. It's currency manipulation because of some comments he made about the peso, and they're claiming he was manipulating the currency. Apparently it's the new thing to just throw your opponents in jail. We're all going South America now, as opposed to the other way around. And so I think that's really the final story of this. It's not necessarily that that this is anything new in politics. It's just that it's new in the West, that we haven't usually seen this type of politics before. But if you look at places like the Middle East, like Africa, like South America, this is just politics as usual.
Oh, well, sad that it's
Eastern Europe as we said.
yeah, this type of election behavior must have snuck through the southern border.
Precisely.
Just like
Another product of immigration. Gotta love it.
Yeah. Staying on the subject of Trump, Judge Chuckins of Washington, D.C. has just gagged the former president, saying, I'm not trying to interfere with the election. This is very, very narrow. He just can't talk about this case or Jack Smith or the jurors or any of the witnesses or any of the evidence. Is this to shut down a former president, or is this fairly common in this type of lawsuit?
Oh, it's very clear that what she's doing is political. And keep in mind, this is a foreign-born judge. This is someone who was an Obama appointee, someone who's shown her bias through many J6 rulings in the past, someone who's had extremely anti-Trump comments in other formats. And so we know where she stands. And I think this is exactly what it looks like. This is someone someone who is putting their thumb on the scales, not only of justice, depriving him of his First Amendment right to simply defend himself, to speak out, and at which point he has said that he will. We have First Amendment and we have the Fifth Amendment, right? So you have the right to speak out, and then you also have the right to not speak. That's why we have the First and the Fifth. They're actually connected in some sense there in terms of our rights. But that being said, them taking away our First Amendment right is clearly, number one, totally against our values. And this is something where, people say, oh, why are you bringing up the fact that she's an immigrant? Why are you bringing that up? And I say, well, people that are from countries that don't have our traditions, that don't have our values, that don't place the same level of importance on these rights, arguably, and in this case, demonstrably, do not understand why we have enshrined the First Amendment to begin with. Then number two, clearly, this is someone who doesn't view the law as a tool to obtain a higher justice. This is someone who views the law as a series of words and a series of tools whereby she can punish political opponents, or she can seek to change the country into a way she sees right. Joy Reid said that this was demographic revenge against Donald Trump. I don't even know what that means, but that's something that Joy Reid said. And so I do think that all of these things come to bear. And at the same time, I would also say, though, that when you look at things like this, it only helps Trump politically, because people that are voting out there, even people that I talk to, just people I know even in regular life that I go to church with, who, they know I'm a Trump supporter, but they're not, maybe, on the Trump train necessarily. They'll say, you know what, I don't know if I like the guy. I don't know if I like what he says, but things seemed better when he was in office. And it just seems like they're treating him so unfairly that it makes me almost want to vote for him, because they can see he's assumed this underdog role. And I think that America loves an underdog. It's literally our origin story. It's the basis for just about all of our movies, from Rocky, to everything else out there. So no, I really think that's something that will end up helping him in the long run.
Yeah. Okay, going back to the Israel, Gaza, Hezbollah, Iran story. Scary stuff. Lots of threats have been made. In the past few days, Iran said they will attack Israel and the United States if Israel goes into Gaza. Then they said, just kidding, we're not going to attack the United States, but we will attack Israel. And now they're saying, okay, we don't want to attack either of them. In fact, we're willing to broker the release of hostages with Hamas on Israel's behalf if Israel will stand down. What are your thoughts on Iran flip-flopping so much in a 48-hour period? And what are your thoughts on what Israel will ultimately end up doing? Because they are getting a lot of international pushback that, yes, we know you lost a lot of people, but if this gets really ugly, we're going to forget that, and we're just going to see you as a religious bully on the world stage.
Well, I think that what we're seeing here in the foreground is similar to what I mentioned about the Democrat shadow primary, is that there's a lot going on behind the scenes right now that we're not seeing. And I think what's probably happened over the weekend is a flurry of diplomatic intervention, not only on behalf of the United States, but also on behalf of BRICS, the BRICS nation bloc. Russia, China, Russia, of course, a traditional player in the Middle East, but of course, Russia very much focused on Ukraine right now. Iran, a key stakeholder in this situation in terms of what happened, obviously very close to Hamas. And then, of course, the role of China being really taking advantage of this situation. We know that China has worked very hard to build rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the past, just even the past 2 years. They were working very closely to bring Iran and Saudi Arabia, not as in terms of any friendship, but at least to the point where they weren't actively seeking to overthrow the other one or launch another war like we saw in the 1980s. But this situation, I think, has shown just again the recession of U.S. power and U.S. diplomacy on the world stage, and really shows the rise of BRICS, the rise of the multipolar world. And when you look at the way that the Ukraine war has actually strengthened the relative influence and power of Iran, not only in Europe and Eurasia, but also in the Middle East. It's incredible how foolish the American foreign policy makers are, because you say that you want to diminish the role of Iran, but you've actually increased it greatly, not only from the $6 billion, which is sort of the Fox News talking point, but also by putting Iran in as a key player in the Ukraine war, by supplying Russia drones, by supplying them with so many munitions. They've really strengthened Iran's hand. At the same time, China, of course, needs that oil from Iran, from Russia. China wants the LNG from Qatar. Well, everybody wants the LNG from Qatar. Everybody wants the LNG from Azerbaijan. That's why you're seeing these moves play out right now as you do. And Foreign Minister Wang Yi, his comments recently from China saying that the Palestinian issue and justice for the Palestinians is the paramount issue for the Middle East. I've been watching China for a long time. I lived there for 2 years. I speak Mandarin. I've never heard a Chinese foreign minister speak so directly about the Palestinian cause before. And I think what you're really seeing is essentially China looking at an open door and walking right into it, picking up the free money on the table, not because they're interested necessarily in building their relations with Israel, which, by the way, China has a very strong relationship with Israel. They're seeing this as a path towards increased relations in the Arab world, and they're walking right in and taking it.
Wow. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch this over the next 48 hours. The level of pro-Palestine rallies around the country has been really interesting to me. The level of anti-Semitism has also been very shocking to me. And I don't know that the two are the same, because there are people, that can separate, hey, Palestine needs help, including getting away from Hamas. But the open anti-Semitism has been very shocking to me. You hear about this stuff, but to actually see it, around the country was very eye-opening to me, at least.
Well, I think that when it comes to this, it is a multifaceted issue. It's a complex issue. It's one that clearly tugs on the heartstrings of Americans. I kind of find myself more in the MAGA America First movement, but at the same time, even in that movement, you find many people that are very, very, very close to this issue, whether you're whether obviously if you're Jewish, there's obvious connections. If you're Muslim or Arab, there's obvious connections on the Palestinian side. For myself, I'm Catholic, and we of course view Israel as the Holy Land. This is a huge Church of Holy Sepulchre, etc. This is a huge, very important spot, and it just goes back to the age-old question of this being the center of three of the world's largest religions, essentially coinciding in one strip of land, that I think you really can't separate it from that. And then at the same time, there are multiple ethnic components to that as well, that are inseparable. But going back to what I said before about this mass immigration, look, the West has allowed mass immigration for the past 40, but really ramped up in the past 30 years. And suddenly there's this, there used to be this sort of notion that, oh, well, you bring in immigrants, it'll help with your GDP, it'll give you a comparative advantage, etc. We've all heard it, right? Those are the people that want to be here. Those are the people that work hard and they just want to make money. But it turns out that when people come from other parts of the world, they're bringing those old feuds, they're bringing those old tribal conflicts, ethnic conflicts, religious conflicts along with them. And many of these new arrivals aren't interested in assimilating directly. And you've seen, of course, this across Europe when we talk about these no-go zones that have been set up in places like I did a whole documentary in Sweden. I called it Invasion Sweden, in Malmo, in Rosengard. You see them in all over France. Of course, numerous books and speeches written about the French issue there. London, Enoch Powell, his Rivers of Blood speech from a long time ago seems quite prescient at this point, because we see these enclaves, really just the ghettoization of these communities. They're not assimilating because we've brought so many of them. And here in the US, we see the exact same problem. So to me, I don't find it shocking at all, because I've been one of the few people that was willing and to raise my hand and say, look, when you import this many people, it's impossible for them to assimilate at the same time. And so instead, what you'll get are essentially parallel communities, parallel societies that are, like I said, bringing along those resentments and those grudges and those prejudices from the past country, and now they're causing problems in the new country. To wit, I mean, just earlier today, there was an attack in Brussels. This Islamic radicals screaming Allah Akbar, shooting a couple of Swedish tourists. And again, we could go down the list of how many times things like this have happened. Plus, here in the United States, there's been a massive psychological operation going for almost, I think this year will be the 10-year anniversary of the start of Black Lives Matter, to essentially create this narrative that the Black community in the United States is akin in any way to the Palestinian situation in Israel, and essentially claiming that the Black community lives in this apartheid state. You hear the same type of rhetoric over and over, to even include the exact same, I'm talking about the BLM organization, by the way, the exact same word of colonizer, right? This word colonizer again and again and again. Well, guess what? That is the specific word that Hamas and these anti-Israel groups use for the Israelis. That same rhetoric was essentially copied and pasted and imported into the United States about a decade or so ago. And I remember having this conversation down when I served at Guantanamo Bay with another intelligence officer, saying that, isn't it interesting that these BLM groups are using the exact same rhetoric that we hear from Hamas and the anti-Israel groups in the Middle East? And of course, we were Guantanamo Bay, we were dealing with radical Islam, and those guys definitely, I should say, definitely agree with the Hamas situation, that we started to see the exact same rhetoric be deployed from BLM here in the United States. And I honestly think it's because they're looking to spark the same type of reaction from those sorts of groups.
Yeah. All right. Final question. Answer it quickly. I know you got to get on to another show. Representative Matt Gaetz said Nancy Pelosi is still running the Democrat side of the House, and that Hakeem Jeffries is a puppet or a place filler. And then, do you think Jim Jordan will get the votes so that Republicans can get a Speaker of the House back in place?
Well, I think that I wouldn't be a DC guy if I went and made predictions all the time. But no, I think that Jim Jordan is very close. I think he's a lot closer than people thought he was. He seems to have the momentum right now, and unless anything changes as we sit and record this, it seems like Jim Jordan is on a track to become the next speaker. But again, anything could change. And Pelosi, of course, she's in charge. Of course.
All right. Jack Posobiec, thank you so much. If people want to follow you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, best way is humanevents.com. We've actually got a huge giveaway this week that I wanted to just throw out for your folks. That for anybody who's watching Stephen Gardner, we've partnered with My Patriot Supply. Everybody knows about them. We're giving away a free Rezvani riot tank this week. Yes, that's right. And a fully up-armored, bulletproof windows, reinforced glass. This thing, it retails for about $500,000. This thing fires pepper spray out of the side mirrors. It has smoke screen capabilities. It has taser electrified door handles. So when you're driving through one of these riots, or if you're just trying to make it to work in Washington, D.C. or Baltimore or Los Angeles, you go to get carjacked, you flip one switch, you can taser it. We tested it on one of our producers. His idea, not mine, but yes, it does work. This thing, 1,000 horsepower V8 in it. Check it out. It's mypatriotsupply.com. Win a tank, and we're doing it through Human Events. The drawing will be later this week.
Okay, great. Jack Posobiec, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening.